So checking back in with the Sea Fury, I've now, this is not, don't worry, this isn't me attempting black basing. This is just checking the seam lines because I was doing the clear parts, so I was using the cockpit colour just to prep those, as you can see in there, like we were doing on the Hawker Wolf back along. It's nice to see in there, and you can see the sharpness of your masking, so that's quite good. And then I've got the masks there on the front windscreen, and then I've filled the cockpit area there. Struggling with light a bit, so sorry about that. I'll try and work on that. So once I've done this, I have just run around the seams that I was worrying about, and it is good to note that the wing joins are absolutely fine, so they're okay. Most of the places where the cowling attaches is okay. The bit on the side where we've used the filler, I mean they're fine for both sides, but there is a little bit of seam work to do running along here where I didn't go in so hard because we got a bit of raised detail, so I was trying to keep that and not soften the edges of that. And there's a little bit of work here and just back there, so I'm just going to go over those seam lines again. I mean, they're nothing major, it's just you can see a very fine line running down there, so I like to work on that. The major part, I suppose, is here where the wing root join is, where I used a bit of plasticard, so I've just got to work on that a little bit more. Again, that was me just trying to preserve a bit of raised detail there and not going in too hard. Usually I sort of go in with a very strong sanding stick, obliterate the detail, but make sure I get down to the join and then build it back up from there. But with raised detail I like to work around it because it's a bit of a pain to put back on. Looking back here, I'm happy with that. It isn't great. It could be better. This is on the rudder where the sink mark is, but I mean it's what I thought. I filled the worst of it and it's taken the effect right off. It's there if you look for it, but at a glance you don't notice it, so I'm going to stick with that, that's okay. So that's how we're looking. Everything else is together and ready to be primed, so I'm just waiting. I've got these parts like this all ready to go. Very simple scheme. Two colours, sky on the bottom and everything underneath is sky. The parts in here are going to be a bit of a slightly off-white colour, but it does look very white. I've obviously seen the aircraft, so I'm not going to change the tone of the white too much, but obviously we don't want a bright white, it's more of a dull white. And yeah, then dark sea grey over the top, extra dark sea grey over the top. The last thing to mention is the navigation lights. So I have looked these up, and it is what I thought, so I'm going to drill a hole into there just to give the effect of a bulb. Then I've got them already half masked, so once I'm happy that the bulb's gone in, I will then mask them, glue them on, and then they will come into the primer with the rest of it and be toned in all the way through. So we're checking again once this is into grey primer and the seam lines are checked, and then we'll be hopefully getting the first coat of sky on underneath. So moving on here with the Sea Fury now, I do have, I finally checked all the seams and I'm happy with them all. I did have to rework here and there, and this was a problem area here as well, so there's just a few points to watch out for. Again, it's basic stuff, nothing, you know, you can't blame the kit. Most aircraft have issues on wing roots, wing joins, fuselage halves, all the rest of it, so nothing out of the ordinary there. So I've now primed, I've painted the interior colour on the canopy there, and this is the original canopy. I have asked for a replacement, so if that one turns up from Airfix I might jump onto that one, because I did buff this out, but I think I'm going to need to buff it again once I've painted it. I did buff it and clear it, I wasn't getting great results, so what I've basically done is buffed it down, got it super clear, but once I was putting the tape on and stuff and had to take it back off, it was then going dull again. So I think what I'll probably do is paint this up as is, then when it's all done, varnished, and we've taken it off, I'll just go around buffing it just slightly again to bring it up to shine, and then stick it on and we're done. So now everything's going to get a kind of medium grey base colour, and then we can start on with the sky. The reason I'm doing that is I didn't really want to do black basing or anything, and where I've used the black I just had it because I was obviously doing the interior colour for Canopy, so I thought I'd carry on and use it and check the seams. Where I've got sky, because I've done this now, it's going to act as a bit of pre-shading, and I don't really want to go down the pre-shading route, so if I do a neutral grey now, that should give us a nice uniform colour, and then when the sky colour comes on, because it's a light colour, it should just show through quite nicely. Now what I was going to show you here is the navigation lights here. I'll zoom in and we'll see if we can pick that up. So hopefully you can see there that where I was mentioning I've drilled a hole and just put the red in, and I've done the same on the other side and put green, and that's just the clear colours from Tamiya. You don't need to use clear colours, you could just use literally any red or green and it will do the same effect, and that just gives you, instead of painting the whole thing, just again it's a little bit more refined detail. Now I don't know, again this could be the way I've put the wings together and all sorts of other things, but they didn't fit in too well, so what I've done is I've actually glued them with Tamiya Extra Thin, put a bit of Mr. Surfacer around there and sanded them in a little bit, and as a consequence of that there is a few rough scuff marks. So I was just going to show you, if you're not aware of this, how easy it is to bring these back. So I'm going to get them back to a nice shine and then mask them up, and then they won't come out until the rest of the clear parts, obviously they'll be unmasked, and then it's not a problem. So I'm using, this is a Flory model sanding stick. There are many available, we won't get into the different types. This is the one I choose, and this is one of the buffing sticks, which I think is designed for paint actually. It's got quite a rougher kind of, like a felt kind of side here, which can, on paint for instance, it's quite good to sand back the paint a little bit without being too abrasive. But the other side is a very nice polishing grade. I don't know the actual grades, but if you listen, you can quite quickly get to where it starts squeaking on the plastic, and that's obviously taking it back to a high polish, and I don't know if you can see there, but it's almost like it's glossed. You see, that's the idea. Anyway, so using that on these clear parts, these will bring them up. So not if you use the rough side like I've just done. If you use the polishing side, so you're starting to wait for that squeak, and the idea is just to blend it all in quite nicely, and you should notice that any scuff should start disappearing and it will just go back clear. It's one of those things, if you haven't done this before, I mean it's an old technique, but when I was new to aircraft modelling, I thought, you know, there's no way you'd be able to bring clear plastic back like this, but it works very well actually. And oftentimes they end up being clearer and shinier than they were when you started. So just continuing with this, there is a lip running around this, which is the kind of holder for the glass. So I don't know, it's like the mount. So there's a part that's going to be connected to the wing. And that's going to be, we're going to mask up to that point, so we don't need to make the whole thing clear, and we want to keep that little ridge, again, you know, for want of a better word, it's like a panel line we're trying to keep in there. And it's sometimes hard to see, and that is looking, that's looking very good. The other way to do this, I did it in the Hurricane build, but it's one of my older builds. If you don't get clear lights, you can just cut a piece of the sprue around the clear parts, you super glue it in, and it'll be a massive chunk of plastic in there, and then with just hard sanding files, sanding sticks, whatever, very coarse ones, you blend it in so you get the shape. Then going over the buffers again, it brings that clear sprue back to a polished clear part. So that's another way of doing clear lights. So there you might be able to see the shimmer in the light there, and that is clear enough for me looking at it. A little bit of roughness, I'll do a little bit more off of camera because it's a little bit awkward, and I think you can probably see that side that it's a bit rougher. Again, I'm sorry if the camera's not picking this up, but you can take my word for it, it is quite rough in there. So that's just another little technique and something that just adds to the overall feel of the build. So I'll go ahead and get those bits done, and then once it's primed, we'll probably check back in once the sky colour's gone on. One last thing with the Sea Fury before we get into paint that I was meant to point out. When I sanded down this seam line, initially it was left because there are these raised panels here, and I didn't want to obliterate them with the sanding, and it wasn't working. I wasn't getting a tight line, so basically I sanded right the way through them, and I've put them back on by cutting small pieces of plasticard. So you've got, I don't really know what they're for, but you've got two panels there, which go across the seam line. Then you've got a smaller panel here that runs, it's right on the seam line, and then you've got this panel here which I mentioned earlier in the build, and I've put on some quite as thin a plasticard as I've got, and then just sanded it down, and they look fine. You know, they're just raised enough, so that's no problem. And I also noticed I had to work the seam of the windscreen in again. That's one thing to point out. It does. If you just put it in, you can easily notice. You can easily push on without noticing that there's quite a difference there, and it's not meant to be. There's no natural panel line there, and I think the windshield goes onto the top of the frame. So just something to check there. You can see here it's shown in the plans. I mean, they show that rimmed bit there. I'm in two minds whether that's what it's meant to be or not. I didn't actually obviously take a picture of that part of the aircraft once I was in it, but looking at some of the reference, I mean here for instance, in the old Airfix magazine, which I'm sure they won't mind me sharing, I mean you can see here there isn't really a panel line there. There's a few other reference shots. Don't know if I actually get one that's showing the top of it. I guess there you can see down here, there, and if I get right in close you can see that it looks like the windscreen just butts straight onto the fuselage. There is a build in this magazine, it's probably worth noting actually. This is December 2017, so if you want a little bit more reference to go with it, the Airfix magazine from December 2017 has a very nice build in it, with some nice reference pictures. Oh, where are we? There you go. There's a couple of pages there of reference pictures, which are quite nice. Nice one of the cockpit showing all the bits, and the build's very nice. And because there's no decals, they use a Dutch scheme, which is very attractive. So just something to look out for there. Obviously it's up to you. With your own reference you can make a decision on what you want to do around there. I have decided to sand that in and make that smooth. So that is it. Everything is ready to go now, so this is going to go straight into primer, and I will be using just a natural grey from Tamiya. So I thought I'd just show you this. I've been doing the painting on the Sea Fury here, so we'll have a closer look at the overall scheme in the next piece of video, but I just wanted to show you here, this is the last piece of painting now. I've even painted in the engine and everything, and I've just got to do some silver panels here on the side, so mask those up. Not taking any chances with this. It will be interesting to see what kind of finish we get, because one side's matte and one side's gloss, and I haven't put a layer of black down or anything. I'm just going to hit it with Alclad 2 polished aluminium. So we'll see what that looks like. If it doesn't look how I want it to look, then I might go over it with the black and then do it again, but we'll see. I'm pretty confident that it'll go on no problem. And then I'll seal that in with a bit of a lacquer coat of super clear, just to make sure we don't get any lift. It's obviously it's well known applying metal finishes that you can get a bit of lift, and there's all kind of variables. So in the past I've applied it and it's rubbed straight off. Other times you can't even get it off with a sanding stick. So I don't really know why that is. I haven't looked into it enough, but for this little piece of work I'm going to go safe and then make sure I seal it in. So we'll check in on the next part, and I'll have all the masking off, and then we'll have a look at the whole paint scheme, get the undercarriage on and start the decaling. this is the stage that we're at now with the Sea Fury. I've put the silver panels in there now with Alclad and sealed those with a gloss coat, and the same here, and they look pretty good, nice and sharp. There is a little bit, because of the strength, because I had Tamiya underneath, and because I was messing about with it a bit, I hadn't sealed it, and the Alclad went on a bit heavy, and it's just melted through a few bits of the Tamiya paint there, which has just meant there's a couple of imperfections, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. I can probably sand it out, and if it worries me a whole load, I can just sand it back and redo it. But the problem is you're going to have to get right down to the base layer and then build it back up all together so that it doesn't show. So I think that we can lose that in a bit of weathering. This side's very nice and smooth. It's a nice shine there. It's not too bright. It's and that reflects the machine quite well that I've seen as well. It's so that's quite good. And now you can see that the paint scheme is fully applied as well. So you've got XF21 underneath, which is RAF Sky, and on top we've got RAF Extra Dark Sea Grey, and I've used Tamiya XF77, which is their IJN Grey. And that is pretty close actually to the colours I've been looking at, and I think that's gone down really quite nice. I've tried to make sure I've got quite a nice straight, nice tight lines there running up to the front of the aircraft and running down the side of the aircraft there. You also got the white, which comes across very nice, which is what the one at Yeovilton's been sprayed in the wheel bay, and the landing gear is also that colour. I then masked around here and sprayed that with NATO black, because on the Yeovilton one this piece in here is black, and then that just puts a bit of black on the engine detail that you can barely see in the back there as well. It's had a gloss coat, and now we're ready for decaling, so it's been very enjoyable up to this point. It's a nice kit, few problems like I've mentioned. Hopefully that hasn't come across too strong. A lot of them are hardly worth mentioning, but as I've gone through the kit, you know, it's just little things I thought I'd point out, so it's just more to help people as they progress with the build. It's not to put you off the kit. It's a really nice kit. And I think for all the people who hate on the panel lines as well, you might notice, this is my personal view, once you get to this stage, they really, I mean, you can see them, but the initial impact that you get on looking at a kit in the box, in the grey plastic, once the paint's on, it does fade that effect a little bit, and it's not, perhaps, you know, a lot of people can be put off a kit before they build it, and I prefer to take the stance of building it and then making a decision. And you know, these panel lines aren't a major issue, so hopefully this build might get some of you guys who are haters of this to actually go ahead and build the kit, because it's a really nice kit once it's together. Lovely shape, you know, it's a very iconic aircraft, and it's really well done from Airfix here, to be honest. And now we're going to apply decals onto this part of the build, and this is always a nice part for me. So this is our section here, so we're going to have all of these here and all of this top section, and then that middle section is for the other scheme. Now all I'm going to look out for is a couple areas of carrier film that I might cut around, certainly around these numbers here. Quite cleverly, I will point out here that Cartograph have actually, there's no carrier film in there, there's no carrier film in these two either, but it is where you need to keep where it's used to keep the numbers together. Now it's also here, not in the circles, and where it's a complete area, it seems that they've got rid of the carrier film. It's still in the V, for instance, and it's still around here, but it's not in the complete areas. And that's probably due to however they remove the carrier film. It needs to be in a complete sealed off area, I guess. That's what it looks like. So in the next step, I'm not going to go completely in depth showing you every decal going on, but we'll do a little bit of a time lapse, and then we'll talk about how the decals went down at the end. Seal them in, very light weathering, probably just flory wash in the panel lines, and then we'll be calling the kit done. The Sea Fury is now ready for decaling, so I've got the undercarriage on here, just to sort of ease everything, so I'm moving it around, and the propeller I'm leaving off separate, because I have to put some decals on here and they need to stay gloss, whereas the actual propeller blades are then matte, so I'm thinking I'll probably decal the whole propeller here and then varnish it down, leaving and then just mask the area where this glossy bit's going to be, then put those decals on, then gloss that over and then unmask it, and that should give the right effect, because I don't like masking over decals because it tends to lift them off. So apart from that, we're ready to get straight into the decals, so I won't film most of this, just a few bits here and there, and hopefully it should start to transform the look of the model. So every now and again you get a funny little thing in modelling like I've got here. I've sort of was about to do a few more processes to this one, and I've kind of decided that I think it's done. The reason for that is the last part you've seen, literally all I've done since painting it, is put the decals on. Then I started looking at giving it this glossy coat. Now it's a sheen really I'm looking for, more than gloss. And I had coated it with this stuff, the Pledge Floor here, clear. And then it was not really looking the way it should. It was a bit grainy. It looked a bit out of scale and all the rest of it. So I then thought, right, well I'll just go over with some of this, which is what I do love. This Super Clear by MRP. It's absolutely fantastic stuff. Goes rock hard and goes off almost instantly. And as I was just hitting that, I was going around the decals and I was doing the wing, and almost like a sort of I suppose almost if you're doing like if you're coming off of a black base, for instance, and you're putting in the colour. I was doing that. I was sort of doing mist coats and then working in an area and working out. And it just started to give this really nice sheen. So I thought, right, okay, that's the way we'll finish it off then. And once I'd done that, I thought, right, okay, it's a clean bird that we're doing. And I was going to hit it with the Flory wash, but after seeing it, because the panel lines are a little bit deep, they kind of, wherever you are looking around the model, you kind of get, you get the natural shading. I wonder if I hit it with a wash, it's going to be a bit too much. Because it isn't pronounced, you know, it's not a dirty aeroplane tool. I was thinking then I might do a pin wash as well, and then I've sort of landed on the fact that I think I'm quite happy with the way it is. Certainly not my best piece of work. There are a few issues, and I did have a few issues with the decals, believe it or not. I found them to be a little bit brittle compared to other Airfix decals. You know, I've used a lot of the Airfix decals over the last 5 years, or 5 to 10 years, since they've started using cartograph and being the sort of new Airfix. And I think the decals sort of hit a peak with the ones that they had in the 262. They were probably the best, the 1/72 262. And then these look great on the sheet, and they are nice, but they've gone right back. You know, they're very matte, and they're a little bit hard to work with, especially when you've got these raised rivets around the tail area here. It is a little bit difficult. And they tear quite quickly and they go off quite quickly. They set quite quickly, which again is something I'm not used to. I've used a lot of cartograph decals, and you know, so I wonder if that's something to do with them being so flat in the finish. I've also struggled to get them to bed down on the wings here, the roundels, completely into the panel lines. I've done what I usually do, put them on, cut along the panel lines, then hit them with micro sole. Quite a lot of times they've probably had 10 coats each, and they haven't gone down perfectly, but I'm happy with it. It looks okay. And then working around the aircraft, I think it's very nice actually. I'm not one for British aircraft, if I'm honest. I do like the German stuff, and certainly some of the earlier war stuff as well, and pre-war planes, but you know, there's no denying this is quite an attractive aircraft. I think I'm pretty bang on with the colour. I think that's pretty close to the one I looked at. It's a very nice option anyway, so that's one to look out for. Is XF77 by Tamiya for extra dark sea grey. It's a nice option if you want to go down that route. I'm going to pull off these wing tip lights, so I haven't done that, so we can do that on the video. So I'm just going to pull these off. Now I did drill into these as I showed earlier in the video, so hopefully that's all worked out quite nicely. And the masking is worked out quite well. It's always the same, one slides straight off, and then you got, this is when I tend to mark the paint. I hit it with the tweezers and can ruin the paint finish. Right, there we go, that's looking pretty good. And I've just noticed that we've got one more piece to add. Finish it off. Now, I think I've mentioned before that I'm building this one for someone else. This is actually going to go to a new home away from me, and so I'm leaving some parts separate. The propeller's separate, and also obviously this piece is separate. Yeah, so very nice build. I like this kit. I've mentioned throughout the build its problems. What kit doesn't have problems? Hopefully, it, you know, I haven't been too harsh. It was never meant to put anyone off the build or anything. Just trying to highlight some of the issues I've had, so you know you don't get disheartened when you get to it. You can think, right, okay, let's approach it in this direction. And forewarned is forearmed, as they say. So I think it's a nice little kit, and when you get to this stage on a build, obviously everything's forgotten, isn't it? You know, when the thing's actually built, you don't remember all the heartache that's gone into it. And this has been in no way that sort of kit. You know, it's been relatively trouble-free, I'd say. Just a few teething problems here and there. It's only really being pointed out because of the fact that it's brand new. So, you know, I just expected slightly more from the kit, I suppose. Now I am going to go around and do a few final touches. Just this is when you get into, you know, it's very easy to skip these parts, but what I'm going to do is go around the frames here and here with this colour. So I'm going to do that. I'm also going to, I've got to paint in the machine gun caps here, so I haven't drilled them out, I've left them because the one in Yeovilton's got caps on it, so I'm going to try and emulate them. Also, I'm thinking about doing a little bit of chipping around the tail wheel and around some of the undergear, which landing gear, which I've seen, and also this grab hook here is held up by wire. It's got a bungee cord wrapped around it and holding it up around this piece here. There's a little hook. Now I haven't got that separated, but I can, you know, I can make it look like the wire's hanging in it. So I'm just going to wrap a little bit of wire around, paint the wire black, wrap it around, and just hook it in there just to show that it's holding it up. So I think that's a nice touch. Just keeping an eye on this canopy here. It's the original kit part, and I've buffed it out, and I've had all sorts of things with it. I didn't get my replacement, so I've gone ahead and used this one because it's good enough. So I'm just going to keep an eye on that. And I think that's probably about it. I might touch in a little bit of a wash here and there where I think the panel lines are a little bit faded, or where it's ones that I've put back in and they're not as deep as they were. But apart from that, I'm not going to do much. So this is the last bit on video, and you'll see the next bit and a little bit close up in the next shots, which will be following this talking bit that I'm doing here. And I'll try and do some nice close-up pictures so you can see. Now, a couple of things to mention. If we go into the tail area here. Now, hopefully you can see there was a little bit of trouble with the decal around this area. That's caused by the raised rivets, and that's probably the main bugbear of this whole kit, is these raised rivets. I mean, I don't understand why they're there. But regardless of that, getting the decals down, again, them not playing ball, they're, you know, like I said, of being a bit more of the brittle type. There's a little bit of cracking around these panel lines because they're right over rivets, so it's a little bit of difficulty. I did lose a little bit of the Q up here as well, which I've just touched in with a bit of white, and I've touched in that with a bit of white. But I didn't want to touch in the red or blue because that would stand out. It's very easy to get those colours, get the wrong options for those colours, and it does show up. This side has gone down a bit better. As you can see, the red is over the panel line. What's happened the other side is, as it's been going down, I've cut it, and as it's been cut, I've slightly moved it this way, back here, and it's just slipped, whereas this side hasn't. So that was the issue. It's my fault, but it's just something to watch out with these type of decals. And you should be able to see there the roundels on the fuselage there as well, gone down very nice, and numbering. It's quite nice, and hopefully that should be quite level if we get to the flight angle. And then just bringing her back. There you can see the silver panels as well running onto the cowling. A little bit, this is the side that's got a little bit of blemishes on it, where the Alcalad ate through to the paint that was underneath it. But I mean, again, we're not gonna. It's not going to cause too many problems. I'm not going to worry too much about this. So this propeller, the whole of the painting and decaling stage has been the most difficult, funny enough. Now, I did see in the article that I've mentioned, the Airfix article, that the propeller and the back of the spinner and the back were left off and the propeller was painted separately. And that's a good way to go. And maybe you could sort of put it together, sand it flush, and then that you've just got to glue it together. Maybe that's something I could have done. I opted to glue it all together and sand it back. And what that then caused was just a little bit of trickiness trying to get the propeller blades sprayed and getting the colour behind the actual spinner. But it was all very easy. You got the yellow parts, sorry, I don't know what they're called, on the tips of the propellers there, on the blades. And then my most proud part of this build is capturing this part on the propeller blades, which I'm very happy with. I'll show you a picture now in the top corner, and that is exactly how I saw the plane at Yeovilton. So it was a little bit of a head scratcher to get that. I mean, it seems like it's something that's quite simple, but it wasn't, because I kept doing things in awkward ways. But I ultimately painted the blade black, did the yellow tips, matted down the blade, then masked the matte areas so that all of it was left was these areas that were glossed. Then I glossed them, then I put the decal on and got it to bed down, and then I glossed over that, took the masking off, and there we are. And that gives the right effect. So I was very happy with that. You can't knock decals again from Airfix as far as quantity and what's included. You get every single stencil that I saw around the plane, that's for sure. Little bit odd in the fact that it's the 2017 version, but we've actually got the wrong pilot. I don't think this pilot was actually flying it in 2017. I think it's I think the pilot's Gotke now, not what does that say? Skiddy. So yeah, just another slight quirk. And another thing I'm going to do as well before we finish off the build is there's a couple areas. We've got this piece here. And that is actually a glass-fronted area with a little pull cord in there to blow the canopy, I believe, from the outside. So I'm going to put a dab of PVA glue in there so it looks like it's clear. And on the underside, we've got these landing lights there and another clear part with lights on this side, which are decals, and that's a sunken area. So just drop a bit of PVA glue in there, and that will give the lensing effect. So that's it now. So I'll leave you with some pictures. It's been a very nice build, very interesting. Not without its problems, but all overcome without any real major issues. And I highly recommend this kit if you want to be doing a Sea Fury. And I think most of the issues that I've had stem from it being one of the first production kits. I do see that a lot that are coming out now don't seem to have any of the problems of the short shots or issues with one side being heavier than the other and all the rest of it. So probably if you're going to buy the kit, see if you can have a look inside the box and just check some of the key areas I've pointed out, and if it's not showing any problems, then go ahead with the kit, because it's going to be a really nice model when it's finished. So I hope you enjoyed the build. Give the video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and hope you look forward to more.